6 spine-chilling home invasions exposed. Terrifying true stories of sinister encounters. Sarah, a hard-working single mother, thought she had it all figured out. Life in Oakwood Crest, a quiet suburb in the northwest, felt secure, predictable. By day, she served pie at the diner, and by night, she scrubbed floors in office buildings. It was exhausting, but in the comforting monotony, she reveled. Her teenage son, Jake, had his own routine: school, skateboarding, and friends. They had their rhythm, and it was enough. Yet, beneath the surface, something sinister began to seep into their lives. Mr. Thompson, their genial neighbor, had always been a steady presence. Once a respected police officer, he had patrolled these streets with a sense of duty and safety. But now, shadows swirled behind his curtains. At first, Sarah dismissed the misplaced garden tools, thought little of the odd figures she glimpsed through his window late at night. But when spectral murmurs floated through the crisp night air, words she couldn't quite catch, her pulse quickened. Trust, as she knew it, began to tremble. When unexplained phone calls started invading her evenings, anxiety crept into her bones. Jake's fears escalated when he confided about a stranger, a hooded figure lurking at the edge of his school. Panic gripped Sarah. She could no longer brush away the shadows. They were closing in. Her heart hammered as her once peaceful home turned into a haunted shell. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As twilight draped its shroud over Oakwood Crest, Sarah's once unwavering sense of security crumbled. She lay awake, the eerie stillness of the house amplifying her fears. Each creak echoed like a warning. The world outside turned frighteningly alien. She sat by Jake's bedside, whispering reassurances, but the shadows had painted their fear across her soul. Was there really danger outside? A part of her hesitated, wanting to believe it was her imagination running wild. Yet, with every sudden sound, every flickering light, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Then, the text arrived. You shouldn't have left the door unlocked. A cold sweat slickened her palms. She flew to Jake's side, heart racing. Stay quiet, she breathed, urgency lacing her words. But a sinister creak echoed from the hallway, severing her last ties to calm. What had once felt like a sanctuary had transformed into a battleground. Shadows crept closer, the intrusion imminent. Just as the front door clicked open, her world teetered on the brink. Figures stepped over the threshold, cloaked in darkness, their intentions shrouded in an unholy shadow. Trust shattered, and with it, the life Sarah had meticulously crafted. Would she be able to shield Jake from this encroaching darkness? Could she fight back against the very monsters she thought she could trust? In this twisted web, reality splintered as the nightmare surged. The question loomed in the air. Would she survive the unfolding terror that now clawed at the edges of her life? The darkness poured in, thick and suffocating, as the figures crossed the threshold. Sarah's breath hitched in her throat. They moved with an unsettling grace, shadows twisting like serpents around them. The sense of dread clawed at her insides. She squeezed Jake's hand, trying to steady her racing heart. Stay right here, she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. The silence that followed could shatter glass. Every fiber of her being screamed for her to run, to hide. Yet she stood frozen, a single mother trying to protect what little safety she had left. Thanks for letting us in, Sarah, one of them hissed, their voice slick with condescension. It sent ice coursing through her veins. Her mind raced. How did they know her name? She had no allies left. Not even Mr. Thompson, who once guaranteed her peace, could be trusted now. Jake tensed beside her. She could see his dark eyes searching for reassurance in hers. It was in that moment when the shadows flicked dangerously close that Sarah made the decision. She would not let them take her son. Not here, not now. She would fight. Suddenly, there was a loud crash from the kitchen, dishes smashed, drawers thrown open. Quick footsteps echoed through the small house. Panic surged anew, and she felt the pulse of terror hammering in her ears. Maybe it was the wind, or a stray animal. No, this was different. One of the figures turned sharply, sensing the motion. "Check it out," he barked, and the second figure sprinted towards the kitchen, barely more than a blur in the shadows. Without thinking, Sarah reached for the baseball bat she kept behind the door. It was worn but sturdy, a symbol of the countless games played in summer. Felt heavy in her hands, yet empowering. She had to act. "Jake," she whispered urgently, "if anything happens, go out the back and run. Don't look back." He shook his head, fear written across his face. "Mom, no." But Sarah had already turned, her instincts igniting. The figure in the kitchen shrieked as something crashed into him. Was it the cat? The shadows cloaked everything. She could barely see, but she could hear the grunts and the scrambling. "Get the lights," the leader yelled, panic creeping into his voice. The urgency was palpable. In that instant, understanding struck. These invaders weren't just here for a scare. They wanted something. But what? With a ferocity she didn't know she possessed, Sarah charged into the kitchen, bat raised high. She swung with everything she had just as the lights flickered on, flooding the space with blinding brightness. For a moment, she was met with chaos. The second figure stumbled back, but it was the sight of his masked face that shattered her resolve. "Let him go," she screamed, eyes blazing. But even as she spoke, Sarah felt her determination falter. A third figure emerged from the shadows, his hand gripping something sharp. "Smart move, lady," he sneered. "But you don't know what you're in for." Her heart galloped. There was a fleeting moment of clarity when everything seemed to slow. Who were they? What did they want? Fear began to seep in again, raw and suffocating. Before she could react, the leader lunged at her, and the world went dark again. As she fell, the thought echoed in her mind. Could she still protect Jake? Would the terror engulf them? Or could they somehow fight back against the rising tide of despair? The question lingered ominously in the air. Who were the real monsters in this story? The darkness was a suffocating blanket, heavy and cold where Sarah landed. The sudden impact had jolted her, but her fear kept her from lingering on the pain. She scrambled to her feet, just in time to see Jake standing frozen, eyes wide, unable to process the chaos unfolding around him. The kitchen was alive with noise, metal clanged against wood, strained breaths, and muttered threats. She gripped the baseball bat tightly, knuckles whitening as she took a step forward. "Jake, get behind me," she shouted, her voice fierce despite the tremor that ran through her. He hesitated still, fear rooting him to the spot. "Move," she urged, louder this time. That single command snapped him back to reality. He darted behind her, small and vulnerable but still her brave boy. She felt a surge of protectiveness rise within her. It ignited a fire against the creeping dread. The leader of the trespassers, masked but undeniably menacing, stood toe-to-toe with an unseen foe, his attention momentarily diverted. Tossing a quick glance at Jake, Sarah's heart raced at the thought of her son being swept into their darkness. "Stay close and we get through this," she whispered to him, though she wondered if she was convincing him or herself with shambling resolve. She raised the bat once more, eyes darting frantically. One figure was down, tangled amid fallen pots and shattered glass, but the third loomed closer, a dark silhouette that seemed to absorb the light around him. "Don't let her get the boy," he growled, his voice gravelly, each word sharp enough to cut through the chaos. Fear sliced through Sarah, but she stood her ground, ready to face him. "Get away from my son," she screamed, launching herself forward. The bat swung through the air like a guardian angel, but her swing fell short. The figure sidestepped easily, his laughter chilling as he taunted. "You really think you can protect him?" In that instant, time seemed to stretch, every heartbeat echoing in her ears. She was running on pure adrenaline, every ounce of her maternal instinct urging her to shield Jake at all costs. And yet, doubt began to creep in. The figure lunged toward her, and she swung the bat with all her might. A crack filled the air, but it wasn't the sound of contact. A sudden, searing pain shot through her hand as something cold and sharp bit into her skin. Blood dripped, slick and warm, pooling around her feet, blurring her vision. "Now you've angered me," he hissed, eyes glinting beneath the mask, almost glimmering with twisted excitement. She staggered back, but Jake clutched her leg, terror weaving through his small frame. "Mom, please." His voice was a fragile whisper, the plea entwined with the suffocating silence that preceded devastation. "No," she gasped. She had to stay strong. Just then, a rough scuffle erupted. A shadow suddenly tackled the assailant from the side. Sarah squinted through the haze of her own fear, recognizing it wasn't just chaos. It was a chance. It was one of the masked figures wrestling with the original assailant. But what would it cost her? "Run, Jake! Go!" she yelled, summoning every ounce of courage left within her. He hesitated, eyes flickering between the battleground before them and the open back door just visible beyond the kitchen. "Mom, no, run!" she shouted, pulling her battered self together. The boy foolishly took off, his small figure darting towards the door, but her own legs felt like they were encased in concrete. The two figures tumbled violently on the floor, each fighting for dominance, unaware of the chaos left behind. Sarah's heart raced, and as she turned to follow her son, a chilling laughter rang through the house. It was a sound that wrapped itself around her, and with it, the knowledge that darkness would not let them go that easily. "Did you think you could escape?" The leader taunted from behind her, voice laced with menace. This is only the beginning. In that moment, as she closed the distance to the door, an unsettling thought gripped her. What if the true nightmare was only just unfolding? And where was Jake? The sound of manic laughter hung in the air like a poison. Sarah's chest tightened. She had to reach Jake, but the ground felt like it swayed beneath her, heavy with dread. Each breath came shallow, and her vision blurred with the crimson that dripped from her wounded hand. "Turn around, sweetheart. Your child's about to learn a very important lesson," the leader sneered. Fear rippled through Sarah. Her heart pounded in her ears, drowning out everything else. With every ounce of strength she could muster, she flung the bat behind her without looking, hoping to connect but fearing what would happen if it didn't. The thud was followed by a grunt, a momentary distraction. She seized it, darting toward the back door where she had last seen Jake. But he was gone. "Jake?" she called, panic fraying her composure. Each syllable felt like a weight, dragging her down as she searched the dim room. The kitchen, once familiar and safe, transformed into a twisted nightmare. Shadows flickered under the moonlight that fought against the drawn curtains. A clattering noise, a chair tipping to the floor, caught her attention. There, a shadow flitted past the doorway leading to the hallway. "Jake!" Her voice came out as a strangled scream, bursting forth with sheer desperation. A gripping dread gnawed at her stomach, a suffocating fear that he was already too far gone, lost in this horror. "Don't worry, Mommy." An eerily cheerful voice echoed from the shadows. It wasn't Jake. The words dripped with malice. "Shut up." Her instinct to protect filled her with rage. Turning on her heel, she faced the intruder, her bloodied hand clenching the bat with renewed determination. "What have you done to him?" The figure stepped into the dim light, a young boy no older than Jake, his face hidden behind a mask, but those eyes didn't match the innocence of a child. They glinted with something far more sinister. "Just a game, that's all." Her heart sank. The feeling of dread morphed into a cold surge of fear. "Where is he?" she demanded, her voice stronger than she felt. "Maybe you'll join him soon." The boy lunged forward, small yet explosive, as if he possessed the strength of his twisted comrades. Sarah swung the bat wildly, and he ducked just in time, launching himself toward her with a startling shriek. In the moment of their struggle, the sounds of chaos echoed from the other room. The men were still fighting, oblivious to the terror that Sarah faced. It felt maddeningly far away. The seconds stretched into lifetimes. "Jake!" She released a panicked cry, desperation mingling with sheer terror. The boy's laughter rang in her ears, a cruel slide into madness. But just as she prepared to strike again, a loud crash echoed, and the scuffle shifted behind her. A heavy body flung itself against the kitchen island with a sickening thud. One of the masked men falling? Or was he rising? The world tilted. Sarah stumbled back, eyes darting between the child and the doorway. If she didn't act, Jake might be lost forever. A flicker of movement in the shadows caught her attention. Jake. He stood at the threshold, wide-eyed and terrified but unharmed. Yet, no time for joy. His eyes darted between her and the sinister figure before her. With newfound resolve, she yelled, "Jake! Run!" The boy hesitated, caught in the grip of confusion. But Sarah's fierce shout jolted him into motion. He sprinted, his small feet pounding against the warped floor, a guiding light in this terrifying abyss. But would he make it? As the child rushed past, an insidious whisper brushed against her ear. "You should have stayed back, Sarah." It was the leader again, his breath hot on her neck, closing in. She took aim at the masked boy, her hands shaking but the bat steady now, and as she prepared for another swing, dread settled deep in her bones. What lay beyond the door? She gripped the bat tighter, heart pounding, ready to face whatever horror was about to unfold. But who would survive the night? The boy darted away, vanishing into the shadows like a wisp of smoke, leaving Sarah breathless. Time slowed, every second stretching into an eternity as she stood frozen, bat clenched in trembling fingers. Her instincts screamed for action. She couldn't lose Jake, not now. With a frantic glance over her shoulder, she caught sight of the masked leader reaching for the bat from the floor where he had collided. Her gaze snapped back to the hallway where the dark silhouette had disappeared. If she hesitated, if she allowed fear to paralyze her, it could cost her everything. "Jake!" She shouted again, her voice cutting through the darkness as she moved toward the hallway, each step echoing like a thunderclap. The sound of her heart thrummed loudly in her ears as adrenaline coursed through her veins. The hallway stretched before her, dim and sinister, shadows curling like fingers along the walls. She took a breath, forcing down the panic, pushing forward, every fiber of her being focused on reaching her son. The living room lay up ahead, chaos still swirling in the background. Shouts and grunts of struggle resonated, carried with the sound of splintering wood. The masked men were still entangled, oblivious to the threat that loomed just behind them. "Mommy!" A small, trembling voice broke through the tumult. Jake was there, hiding behind the couch. Relief washed over her, almost overwhelming until she spotted the figure standing just inches from him. "Stay away from him!" Sarah roared, her heart hammering. The boy from before slid out from behind the continued chaos, grinning beneath his mask, eyes gleaming with malice. "He's mine now," he shrieked, before lunging forward again with blinding speed. Sarah reacted on instinct, lunging toward Jake, throwing herself in front of him just as the masked boy reached out, claws bared. The two collided with a sickening thud, Sarah's bat swinging wildly, narrowly missing the boy, who was now grappling with her. A sickening laughter echoed around them, making her skin crawl. She could hear the leader in the background taunting, egging on this grotesque game. "You'll never win." But Sarah wasn't going to let it end like this. Every ounce of maternal love surged through her. She dropped the bat, using her hands now, her nails digging into the boy's masked face, desperately trying to pry him off. "Jake, get to the door. Now!" she yelled, as she pushed with all her strength. The boy slipped back momentarily, but with a speed that was terrifying, he charged again, his laughter echoing in the dark like a demonic anthem. In the turmoil, the leader broke free from the scuffle, eyes scanning like a predator zeroing in on its prey. "Finish her!" he roared. The boy hesitated, glancing between his leader and Sarah. In that moment, confusion flickered across his masked face. Was he truly just a child, wrapped in this evil facade? "Jake!" she screamed again, desperation clawing at her throat. And then she saw him, her baby boy standing rooted at the entrance, eyes wide, a mixture of fear and determination skimming his features. He held a small kitchen knife, trembling in his small grip. "Mommy, I know. Get out. Go." In an instant, the masked boy lunged at Sarah again, but she sidestepped, desperately grabbing the abandoned bat before swinging it hard. With a satisfying crack, the bat connected, sending him sprawling to the ground. But as she turned to her son, the leader was on her, a flash of steel glinting in his hand. Time stood still. Sarah's heart dropped. Was this it? Get away from her! Jake shouted, surging forward, resolve lighting his tiny frame. Sarah's heart raced, fear and hope colliding. She had to get Jake out. They had to escape. But the sudden realization loomed over her: was the door still open? Or had they sealed their fates? With the leader poised to strike, the room plunged into darkness. Then the lights flickered back on. What stood in front of them next would change everything. And as Sarah faced that horror, one question screamed in her mind: would they survive what was about to unfold? The flickering light stabilized, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The leader loomed just a foot away, his face contorted in a grotesque mixture of rage and delight. Behind him, the masked boy wriggled on the ground, stunned but rising quickly, readying for another attack. Jake's small figure trembled, clutching the knife like a lifeline. Sarah's heart raced as she took quick stock of the room. Surely they could overcome this nightmare together. Their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. "We can make it, Jake," she whispered fiercely, trying to channel courage into her child. They needed to be a team. The masked boy shot to his feet, ready to charge again, but in that moment, something strange happened. A piercing scream echoed from somewhere deeper in the house, a sound so raw and wrenching it chilled Sarah to the bone. It was a woman's voice, filled with anguish, resonating like the tolling of doom. The masked leader turned sharply, confusion rippling across his features. What had they done? Who else was here? "Mommy!" Jake cried, confusion flickering in his eyes. The leader misjudged the urgency in Jake's expression. He saw an opportunity and lunged forward, his weapon poised, but he had taken his eyes off Sarah. With a swift motion instinct, raw and powerful, Sarah swung the bat again, this time finding its mark. It struck the leader's side with a harsh crack. He crumpled, rage erupting from within. Sarah seized the moment, her heart pounding as she called out to Jake, "Now, run!" But Jake hesitated, torn between his mother's call and the frightened voice still echoing through the house. "Jake, we have to go. We can't save anyone else right now." Flooding terror propelled Sarah forward, forcing her into the light of the living room. The air was thick, the weight of unseen eyes bearing down, every second fraught with danger. Jake's small feet shuffled along the floor, making their way towards her. But the masked boy was up again, his laughter turning from childlike to something darker. "You'll never escape," he shrieked, advancing with hunger in his eyes. Light struck the room like a spotlight, illuminating their dark surroundings. In that moment, Sarah saw everything: the edges of fear intertwining with shadows, the creeping sense of dread nestling into her gut. She took a step back, instincts flaring. She needed to get Jake out, but the way to the door was now sealed by the masked boy and the leader, wrestling to get back on his feet, rage in his eyes. Desperation surged. "We need to move," she shouted, urgency tightening her chest. She thrust the bat forward, a shield against the looming threat that was growing bolder by the heartbeat. Suddenly, the scream cut through the chaos again, more urgent now, as if begging for release. Sarah felt the pull of something primal within her, the instinct to help another mother in distress. "Please," she murmured softly, half to herself. "Mommy, I can't leave her." Jake cried out, finally wrapping his small hand around Sarah's leg. In that split second, reality cracked like glass. Every instinct screamed at Sarah to escape, yet the heartstrings of compassion pulled her deeper into the nightmare. She didn't know who was crying, but it didn't matter. All she could think of was the image of a mother losing everything. The tension in the room spiked, the masked boy's grin unfurling into a twisted grimace. You will regret this. There's no way out. Panic ignited in Sarah's chest. They could be trapped forever. Jake! She yelled, her voice shaking with urgency and desperation. We have to save her. We can't leave anyone behind. But behind them, the leader was back on his feet, eyes burning with wrath. You can't save anyone. You don't control this game. Sarah's mind raced. A plan formed, however fragile. They could at least fight their way to freedom. Follow me, she shouted, pushing Jake ahead, bat raised, ready to confront the horrors ahead. But as she took one step towards the scream and away from the growing darkness, a sudden explosion of footsteps thundered from the rear of the house. A wave of new terror washed over her. Go, now, she commanded, a primal urge clawing its way to the surface. They would either face this together or succumb to the horror. What lay ahead was darker than she imagined, and as charged bodies surged closer, a sinister question slithered into her mind. What if saving someone else meant losing everything? The heavy thud of footsteps reverberated through the hallway, each one echoing with lethal intent. Sarah tightened her grip on the bat, knuckles white, heart racing like a wild animal. The masked boy cackled, a sharp, jarring sound that grated against her nerves. Fear was alive in the room, palpable and thick as the dark. Mommy! Jake's voice rang out once more, crackling with desperation. Sarah felt the weight of his small hand on her leg. She glanced back, her heart still torn. The scream grew louder, insistent, pulling at her soul like a petulant child. Just as she was about to make a decision, the leader lunged towards her, a grotesque grin creeping across his face. He was upon them faster than she anticipated. The bat swung instinctively. It connected with a sickening thwack, stunning him momentarily. A rush of adrenaline flooded her veins. Keep moving, Jake. This way, she yelled, adrenaline driving her forward into the blackened hallways of the house. Each step felt like running on knife's edge, as if the very floorboards might give way beneath them. The air was thick with fear, smothering, as if the house itself were alive and breathing, watching its prey as they darted down the hall, shadows twisted like tendrils around them. Sarah's instincts screamed for her to keep going, to flee from the cries leading her deeper into the heart of the nightmare. But another scream erupted a higher pitch this time, surfacing from what felt like the very walls. Help me! The voice was raw, desperate, laden with terror. It was more than enough to seize Sarah's thoughts and unravel her resolve. She hesitated, glancing back at Jake. His eyes were wide, pleading. Mommy, we have to help her. Visions of another mother, lost and afraid, clawed at her heart. Maybe this was the key. Maybe if they saved the woman, some part of this madness would shred away. Okay, Sarah whispered, her voice trembling as she pulled Jake closer. She edged toward the source of the scream, every fiber of her being screaming against it. The leader's eyes were locked on them, his wrath palpable. You can't escape the game, he snarled, advancing with a calculated menace. The masked boy howled with laughter, jerking down the hall like the twisted puppet he was. You'll find only death. Ignoring the taunts, Sarah pushed forward, instinct guiding her. The design of the house became a maze, dark corners and forgotten rooms whispering secrets, moaning with dread. They turned a sharp corner, and there it was, the door partially ajar. Please, the voice begged again, fragile and fading. Mommy! No! Jake whimpered, the urgency in his voice tangling around Sarah's heart. She couldn't do this. Not when danger loomed so close. But the voice echoed, and she felt it wrapping around her, leading her into the unknown. With one swift movement, Sarah pushed open the door. Her breath hitched. Inside, the room was drenched in shadows, heavy with an unshakable dread. Ropes coiled like snakes across a cot, and blood stains marred the floor. Help! The voice came again, scratched and guttural, not from a place of hope but of pure desperation. Behind her, the leader bellowed, fury cracking his features. Get away from there! Panic struck Sarah hard as she realized the scream came from nowhere and everywhere. An echo of lost souls trapped within the walls of horror. "Where is she?" Jake cried, confusion spilling from his small frame. An electric silence thrummed in the air, a moment hanging in the balance before the chaos erupted again. The leader charged, and Sarah felt the moment crack as the door slammed closed behind them. Sarah understood one cruel truth. Running meant surrendering to the dark. They were deep in it now. With nowhere to go but back into madness, she wondered could they escape this horror without losing themselves. And glaring at the shadow that loomed nearer, that uncanny grin widening, she knew they were already too late. The air thickened as the door clicked shut, sealing them in a tomb of darkness. Heart hammering, Sarah spun on her heels, bat poised to strike, eyes wide in the gloom. The room pulsated with despair, shadows dancing to a silent symphony of terror. She could feel Jake's small body trembling beside her, clutching her leg, his breath shallow and rapid. "No one is coming to help you." The leader's voice sliced through the silence, a malevolent growl echoing off the walls. "You've entered a world that belongs to us. Stay close, Jake," she whispered, mustering her courage even as adrenaline flooded her system. There was no way out but through. But into what horror? The room taunted her with its grotesqueness, a tableau of torment waiting to unfold. "Help!" The voice cried again, a guttural wail of agony that seemed to seep from the very walls. It resonated deep in Sarah's chest, clawing at her sanity. "Where is she?" Sarah demanded, more to herself than to Jake. "Where is this woman?" The shadows shifted, and her heart lurched. Hooded figures moved silently, mere flickers at the edges of her vision. Were they real or just her imagination feeding on fear? Panic clawed at her throat, tightening like a noose. "Mommy," Jake's voice trembled. "I don't like this." "Me neither, baby. But we can't go back out there," she replied, biting back the fear that spiraled in her gut. Whatever horrors lay ahead, they had to face together. In the eerie hush, a rustle interrupted her thoughts. The door they had entered through creaked open a fraction, enough for Sarah to glimpse the leader's figure backlit by the dim light outside. He smirked, a predator toying with its prey. "You think saving someone will help you? You're only making this worse for yourself." "Shut up," Sarah snapped, gripping the bat tighter. Desperation shielded her brittle hope like armor. The shadows shifted again, and from their depths emerged a shape slight, trembling. Sarah squinted into the dark, recognizing the figure of a girl, her face smeared with dirt and dried tears, her eyes wide with terror. "Help me, please. Hang on." Sarah lunged forward, her instincts screaming at her to save the girl. But as she reached out, her heart quaked at what she saw. The girl's body was bound with ropes, her face pale as death. A mask obscured her features, a symbol of the very horror they were trying to escape. She shivered, a ghost in chains. "It's a trap, don't get close." In that moment, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It was all too late. The echoing laughter of the masked boy filled the room, a chorus of madness swirling around them. The walls pulsed with agony as if the house itself was alive, a malevolent entity feeding on their fear. "Mommy!" Jake's distress snapped her to the present, yanking her back from the brink of despair. But it was too late. The leader's footfalls thundered closer, furious footsteps heralding their impending doom. "Run!" Sarah yelled, adrenaline surging. They darted toward the far side of the room, the weight of the bat heavy in her grip, the shadows clawing at her heels. They were trapped, drawn into the sinister dance of fear, and every instinct screamed that time was running out. Behind them, the door slammed shut again, sealing their fate. They had entered a nightmare they couldn't escape, a trap woven from despair and malice. "Maddie!" the girl cried, the name slipping from her lips like a prayer. "Who's Maddie?" Jake asked, fear spilling from his small face, confusion amplifying their peril. "Don't listen," the girl rasped. "They'll use you." The masked boy's laughter echoed, each sound pushing their panic higher, drilling into their hearts. "Welcome to your reckoning." Sarah felt the shadows close in, the suffocating dread roping them together. Right now, survival felt like a distant dream. The walls echoed with chaos, their cries subsuming the silence, and she realized they were inches from oblivion and trapped in a game where the stakes were more than just life and death. A crushing silence fell, and the house seemed to lean closer, hungry. With nowhere left to turn, Sarah braced herself for the truth that in that dark moment, she understood. Sometimes the past doesn't want to be buried, and perhaps the darkness wouldn't let them go until it fed. The moment they broke from the shadows, Sarah felt a surge of desperation. She would protect Jake no matter the risk. Heart pounding, she glanced back. The girl's trembling face burned in her mind, showing the horrifying truth they needed to escape. "Give me the bat." The voice erupted from behind them, a wicked urgency bubbling in the leader's words. "No," Sarah shouted, instinctively tightening her grip. They were racing against time, and every second counted. She sensed the leader's fury igniting, darkness swirling like a storm around them. "Run," she urged, pulling Jake along, his small hand gripping hers tightly. They dashed to a far wall, the space feeling impossibly smaller, closing in on them. The laughter of the masked boy grew louder, echoing off the grim surfaces, an oppressive reminder of their peril. Just ahead, Sarah saw a gap near the floor, shadows creeping into it like hungry tendrils. Her mind raced. Was it an exit or another trap? "Mommy!" Jake cried again, fear etched into his features, his voice nearly breaking. She had to make a choice. "Stay here," she barked, dropping to her knees and scrambling toward the opening. Each inch felt weighted, an unseen force pushing her down, threatening to envelop her. She squeezed her body through the narrow passage, desperately hoping for escape. Her heart sank when she felt cold hands grasping at her arms, fingers like icy claws grabbing her with violent urgency. "Help! I'm stuck!" The girl's muffled cries were lost in a rush. The leader was near, footsteps purposeful and relentless. The bat felt heavy as a boulder. There was no time for hesitation. She shoved herself further out, feeling the pressure intensifying behind her. Suddenly, Jake's terrified scream pierced the air. That single sound shot through her, sharp and raw. "Jake!" She panicked, twisted around, struggling against the pressure. The shadows closed behind her. She caught a glimpse of Jake being pulled by the masked boy, his little body twisting in terror. "No! Let him go!" The intensity of her scream reverberated, but it barely echoed against the walls. The girl's warning echoed in her head, slicing through the noise. "They'll use you." Jake fought against the boy, but the masked figure was stronger. Fear clouded his eyes. "Mommy!" he cried, voice cracking in frustration. The leader stepped forward, his presence overwhelming. The air became thick with something sour and corrosive. "Grab him, Sarah. It's your choice." The leader grinned, those eyes glinting with malice. "Join us or lose the boy forever." The words were a dagger, cutting deep. Panic surged, overtaking her senses. The dichotomy of her choices choked her. Save Jake now, or risk being irreversibly caught in this web of doom? "Sarah." Jake's voice trembled, a whispered plea vibrating through the air, each syllable ringing with despair. "Hold on." With renewed determination, she bolted forward, fueled by the primal instinct to protect her child. She swung the bat, a fierce arc meeting nothing but air. They were trapped in a dance of shadows and malice, but she refused to become prey. Not today. Jake tumbled to the floor, the masked boy losing grip just long enough for Sarah to snatch him up in a fierce hug, pulling him close, shielding him from the darkness. "Go," she shouted, and they lunged forward, retreating towards the small opening she had escaped through moments before. But the laughter rose again, a cacophony of otherworldly joy. The walls quaked, groaning beneath sinister pressure. In a final surge, the leader shouted, "You can't escape what's already in your soul." They pushed through, slipping into the narrow crack, their bodies barely wedging through. The sounds of pursuit echoed behind, the shadows swirling as they slammed through the gap, landing hard on the other side. Panting, they spilled into a black corridor, a different terrain of darkness. But a chill ran through her. Something was still lurking, waiting beyond the reach of the next corner. What now? Jake whimpered, trembling in her embrace. She turned to the swirling blackness, adrenaline coursing, every instinct warning her of impending doom, and just beyond her line of sight, she noticed a flickering light, barely illuminating something small and unrecognizable, but there was one more thing she knew. That laughter would find them again. The darkness was alive, hungry, and this time it hungered for more than just fear. What had it already claimed from them? That was the question that hung in the air, an imminent storm around them. The air felt electric as Sarah and Jake stumbled into the hallway, limbs heavy with exhaustion but hearts still racing. They were alive, together, but the dread that seeped through the walls clung to them like a thick fog. "Mommy, what if they come back?" Jake's voice trembled, each word escaping like fragile wisps of smoke. "They will not," she assured him, though doubt curled in her stomach. "We'll find a way out." The flickering light at the end of the corridor beckoned, a faint hope in an ocean of despair. It glowed like a beacon, cutting through the suffocating darkness. Forcing her legs to move, Sarah tightened her grip on Jake's small hand. They pressed forward, past doors that whispered of horrors contained within. Just as they neared the light, the laughter echoed again, echoing off the walls like a haunting melody, chilling her to the core. "You're not safe. Not now. Not ever." The masked boy's voice taunted from the depths of the shadows, making Sarah's heart race in both fear and anger. "Keep moving," she urged, urgency thrumming in her veins. The soft light transformed into a doorway, revealing a room that felt worlds apart from the chaos they had fled. It was cluttered but seemed brighter, with pieces of furniture in varying states of decay. A threadbare sofa sat awkwardly against the wall, a flickering bulb dangling overhead, casting flickering shadows that danced menacingly. "Where are we?" Jake whispered, caution coloring his tone. "It's okay, baby. We'll be okay." But as she spoke, instinct churned in her stomach. They could not let their guard down. Not yet. Suddenly, the laughter morphed into a shriek, echoing through the room. The masked boy burst through behind them, grinning wildly. "Did you really think you could escape? The game has just begun." An icy hand snaked around Sarah's heart, and she spun, instinctively placing herself between Jake and the approaching figure. "Get away from us," she screamed, fists clenched tightly around the bat. But then something surprisingly bright, the flickering bulb surged, illuminating the room fully. It caught the masked boy off guard, casting sharp shadows that seemed to dance for joy. The sudden brightness revealed more than she anticipated. There were more figures lurking, an entire ensemble of hooded forms moving with intent, eyes glinting like predators ready to pounce. "We're not playing anymore." A cold voice emerged, resonating through the air, its chilling tones sending shivers down her spine. The leader stepped forward, rage splashing across his features. "You chose the wrong game to play, Sarah." Panic erupted, every instinct screaming at her to protect Jake at all costs. "Jake, through that door. Go," she ordered, her voice strong and firm. "No," he protested, desperation filling his voice as he stood rooted by her side. "I can't leave you. Go," she shouted with a fierceness that rattled her own resolve. "You have to trust me. I'll find you." With every ounce of his bravery, Jake dashed toward the opening, anxiety propelling him forward just as Sarah swung the bat at the advancing hooded figures. It connected with a crunch, and the momentum lifted her spirit for the slightest moment. But just then, the air shifted, thickening with malevolence. "Think you can fight against fate?" The leader laughed, edging closer through the chaos. "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into." Just then, a whirlwind of activity erupted. Shadows merged, shoving one another, grappling in a chaotic dance. Sarah felt her heart sinking. Was this their last stand? Would they be consumed in this nightmare forever? Still reeling from the energy, she turned toward the door. "Jake, he's your brother. Let him go." A hush fell over the room, everything froze. The laughter cut off short as the masked boy turned, eyes wide, confusion overtaking his twisted grin. "Brother?" He whispered, as if the word itself was foreign. Sarah used that moment. Yes, we are family. We stick together. We fight together. Each word was a rallying cry. Pulling Jake back from the edge of terror toward her side again, a renewed fury surged through her, mixing with a protective instinct that felt primal. No more games, she shouted, unleashing every ounce of desperation into the swing of the bat once again, catching the boy off balance. The sound rang loud, a stark resolve filling her spirit as she pressed forward. Run, Jake, she called, knowing she had to withstand whatever came next. Jake hesitated, fear battling trust in his wide eyes. But amid the chaos, she could feel something shift. The other hooded figures faltered, glancing at each other in confusion, their power waning. Join us, the leader shouted again, desperation creeping into his bravado. You belong to us. No, Sarah roared, swinging the bat with renewed purpose. I belong to him. Something shattered behind them, breaking the spell that clung to the air like a thick fog. Manic laughter pierced through, but this time it felt different, disjointed. The room quaked, a heartbeat thrumming with desperation. And in that moment, Sarah saw light beyond the door, a way out, a chance to escape. Now Jake, through the door, she yelled, adrenaline propelling them forward. They raced together, hand in hand, the soft glow wrapping around them, pulling them towards safety. Behind them, shadows writhed, frustrated and furious, pursuing them through the tumult. But just as they reached the threshold, the leader's voice boomed, slicing through the clamor. No, you cannot escape where you belong. Fate is not written yet, Sarah yelled back, adrenaline fueling her courage. They burst through. Sunlight flooded their senses, bright, blinding, and stinging against their skin, forcing them to shield their eyes against the harshness of reality. Breathless and trembling, they found themselves on a quiet street, the soft sound of birds chirping breaking the oppressive silence they had left behind. The suburban air felt soothing, tangible, a world away from the nightmare they had just escaped. Did we make it? Jake asked, his small voice tinged with disbelief. Sarah knelt beside him, cupping his face in her bloodied hands. Yes, baby, we did. Alarms began to sound nearby, blending with the sounds of reality. In the distance, she saw two figures approaching, familiar shapes who had come to intervene. They climbed to their feet, bruised but alive, together. The bricks and mortar of horror began to crumble behind them, the options laid out in a new path. Maddie? Jake whispered hesitantly, remembering the girl they had tried so hard to save. Not right now, she murmured, though an ache filled her heart. But maybe someday. And as they stood there, the distant echoes of laughter faded, leaving behind the knowledge that they had faced the shadows and emerged into the light. This wasn't the end. It was the start of healing, a journey reshaped by fear, but forged in strength. As the sirens grew closer, Sarah clasped Jake's hand tighter. They had faced darkness together. They would face whatever awaited on the other side. But they wouldn't go it alone. Now they had each other. The noise of the world blended with their heartbeat, a rhythm of hope, defiance, and survival, echoing through the quiet suburb of Oakwood Crest. And that, perhaps, would always be enough. Now, if you've enjoyed this wild journey, I need you to do something important. You need to subscribe right now to the channel, so you don't miss the next terrifying exclusive stories. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm and keep these tales alive. Seriously, it makes a difference for us. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this heart-pounding conclusion. I want to hear from you. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support for the channel and let us grow this incredible community together.